This article came out a couple days ago. On Monday. Gen Z is returning to religion. Why? Excellent question. As a Gen Z myself, I have a couple of reasons, but let us look at this article on Zero Hedge to see why exactly. So, in the past, the younger generation tended to rebel against the religious norms of their parents. Well, really, only a couple times in the past, notably post World War I and the baby boomers of the 60s. Anyways, young people's resistance to the rules and institutions of religion was assumed and expected. Really, only so much so in the 20th century. But that's not the case anymore. And according to a recent article from Axios, wherever that is, members of Gen Z, which includes young people born between 97 and 2012, are actually more likely to go to weekly religious services than millennials and younger Gen Xers. According to some reports, church attendance has quadrupled amongst Gen Zers in recent years. Excuse me. America witnessed a steady decline in Christianity from the 1970s through the 1990s, with only about 46% of Americans born in the 90s identifying as Christian. Yet, that falling trend has abruptly halted, likely due to a surge in religiosity amongst young Americans, particularly young men. Some Catholic dioceses, for instance, have reported a 70% increase in converts this year compared to last year being 2024. And many of these new converts are people in their teens and 20s. The winds have changed. The phenomenon is not restricted to just the United States either. Throughout the West, which has for so long been the graveyard of Christian civilization, really it's been the graveyard for only about the last 200 years at the most, but that is a fair point. Dominated by an aggressive liberal secularism. Not aggressive in every case, but in my country, at the very least, in the last 10 years or such, it has been a very aggressive liberal secularism. There are signs of religious resistance. In Britain, for example, the percentage of people aged 18 to 24 whom attend church at least once a month spiked from 4% in 2018 to 16% in 2025. This included a 21% gain among young men. Meanwhile, across the channel in France, the Catholic Church baptized more than 10,000 adults in the 2025 Easter Vigil. A 45% increase over baptisms in 2024 and a 90% increase over 2023. Even in the Netherlands, which is certainly no bastion of Catholicism, priests are noting an increase in young people attending Mass. According to Dutch Cardinal Willem Eyck, the numbers are not huge in the Netherlands, but we hear these noises from almost every pastor. It is clear that something is happening. We also see it reflected in the interest in the priesthood. There are many new applications. While not just the Catholic Church seeing this growth, Catholicism in particular seems to be garnering unexpected interest from the young. In an interview with Fox News, Gen Z influencer Isabel Brown explained that time-honored traditions and unyielding teachings of the church appeal to young people who feel disillusioned with inauthentic forms of Christianity that sway with the times. Moreover, according to Brown, Catholicism's teachings teaching that Jesus himself can be directly encountered in the Holy Eucharist. Oh, gosh, we're going to have to make a video about that, the Holy Eucharist. It offers a real experience of the transcendent that's especially enticing in a culture given over more and more to the artificial and inauthentic. What this really boils down to is a level of relationship and intimacy with Jesus offered through the Holy Eucharist that is unfound anywhere else, Miss Brown said. So the evidence is clear. A religious revival is emerging. The question is why? To Brown, it's a natural reaction against what she sees as the evils of the age. Quote, you watch the degradation of marriage, the normalization of transitioning children, abortion by the millions for the most vulnerable in our society over the past several decades. And in the midst of this darkness, we're watching young people run back towards God, end quote. Cardinal Ike identifies a thirst for stability and meaning in those newly interested in religion. The younger generation often lacks a fixed point in their lives. Their lives have no deeper meaning or destination, but questions about meaning arise for everyone, including them. And conservative commentator Matt Walsh came to the same conclusion in his analysis of the phenomenon, arguing that human beings inherently need meaning and purpose in their lives and their culture. You cannot have a society that exists without meaning for very long, he said on his podcast, The Matt Walsh Show. I'll do my best impression of the guy. A society without meaning will either collapse and be destroyed, or it will be revived and it will rediscover meaning. That's a terrible impression of Mr. Walsh. My apologies, Matt. If you ever watch this, that was nothing against that gruff manliness of your voice. The insights of Ike and Walsh are backed up by the by the famous research of Austrian psychologist Viktor Frankl, who conducted a careful study of human nature when he was placed in a concentration camp during World War II. Stripped of all the normal vestures of life, all the veneer of civilized life, Frankl's fellow prisoners presented a stark image of human nature reduced to its essentials. Frankl concluded from studying human behavior in the camp and afterwards in his clinical practice that humans are not fundamentally motivated by the desire for power, as Marx thought, for sexual drive, as Freud insisted, but by an acute need to find meaning in existence. From these insights, Frankl developed his own school of psychotherapy known as logotherapy, which he described in these terms in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Logotherapy focuses, quote, logotherapy focuses on the meaning of human existence as well as on man's search for such meaning. Man's search for meaning is the primary motivation in his life and not a quote-unquote secondary rationalization of instinctual drives, end quote. According to Frankl, it is humanity's unheard cry for meaning, ignored by the post-truth modern society, that causes many modern mental health problems. Young people today aren't convinced by the pseudo-meaning dished up by contemporary society, the appetizing yet ultimately substanceless consumerism, hedonism, secularism, and individualism. So, They're turning to the force that provided meaning for generation upon generation of our ancestors, religion. Part of the meaning furnished from religion involves a sense of belonging. Young generations want to become something bigger than themselves. The Western cult of unchecked individualism and personal freedom has turned out to be a rather lonely and unfulfilling path for many. It might explain, too, on the other end of the spectrum, the rush to find an identity within LGBTQ plus and similar groups. Quote, many young people have turned to religion to find community and connection after the isolating years of the pandemic, which hit Gen Z harder than most. End quote. That is absolutely correct. Couldn't have said it more. Couldn't have expressed that more. And this was theorized by the Axios article. So, as we know, during COVID, many people's primary connection to the wider world was the internet. Gen Z is among the first generations to grow up more or less with the internet and be shaped by it. That upbringing has come with its own set of problems. But it's also been, ironically, a path to a more authentic experience of life for many of these digital natives. The internet has allowed people to forge or rather rediscover certain intellectual paths that are, quote, far from the maddening crowd. The internet provided an alternative to mainstream culture, which, during the really heavy years of decline in religiosity, was more narrowly controlled and more uniform via television, radio, Hollywood, and the music industry. All these cultural mediums are transmitting a strong secular message, but the internet, for all its problems, has now opened up myriad forms of alternative information and enlightenment, allowing more traditional, less mainstream messages to get through in a way they probably haven't, or probably didn't, a generation ago. So, Cardinal Ike of the Netherlands specifically attributes the conversions he's seeing to internet evangelism, and stating that the young converts have, quote, have found their way to the church through the internet and Catholic influencers on social media, end quote. Similarly, sociology professor Anne Hendershot notes that the internet has allowed for a new form of evangelization called for by Pope John Paul II in the 1980s. Where and how far will this new wind blow? It's impossible to say. But for those who long for a restoration of tradition in America and some kind of bulwark against the further erosion of values once held sacred in our country, especially religious ones, this wind bears a scent of hope. As the younger generation begins to replace the older one in posts of influence, Gen Z is growing up, as we know. Not all of us are, not all of Gen Z are children now. They are entering adulthood. Influence. Their beliefs will become increasingly the beliefs of the institutions that make up society, and their priorities the priorities of culture. If current data is any indicator, those priorities will be faithful to traditional religious belief, which could signal a wholesome cultural revolution, or more accurately, restoration. As Ms. Isabel Brown put it, quote, God's not done with American culture yet. Now, side note, whatever that might mean, we don't exactly know. Perhaps it means a sort of next step in the MAGA movement, or a broader, more perhaps even radical Catholic or Christian, for that matter, fundamentalism and evangelization. And given how the stats show in this article that Gen Z, young men in my generation, are converting more and more to the tradition of what Christianity is, as it said, it is going to shape the culture of not only popular culture, but institutional culture, even in government and education. So, okay, this is going to be funny. Views expressed in this article are opinions of the author and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Epoch Times the Epoch Times, not the Epoch Times. I don't know why they pronounce it the Epoch Times. Or Zero Hedge, sorry. Why that's funny is this article is written by Tyler Durden.
Shut up!
Yeah. Well, at least he wasn't talking about Fight Club. But in all honesty, I think that this mass, I guess, exodus from secular culture into religious conversion is worth talking about. It's not talked about very much enough by mainstream media, other than Fox News or whatever. It's not acknowledged much by Hollywood. It's not really acknowledged at all in prestigious institutions for education. And probably because it's an uncomfortable truth to the left-wing world. And the left-wing world, the left has had a good hold on much of the West's institutions for the good part of 60 years. I think that this is not only interesting, this is almost exciting, because we can see that, well, the world is going to change, and it's kind of cool to, I guess, be a part of a generation that takes tradition and history seriously. Put it that way. Anyways, that's all I have for today. So rate, comment, subscribe. See you in the next video.